My name is Captain Peter Jensen, though most folks simply call me Jensen. For the past 40 years, the sea has been my home. Now, as I prepare to hang up my captain's hat and step back onto solid ground for good, I feel a responsibility to leave something behind. Not for my seasoned crew. No, most of them have their sea legs firmly beneath them, but for the rookies who will follow in our footsteps. Rig 32 is no place for the reckless or the unprepared. The ocean does not tolerate arrogance, nor does it forgive ignorance. If my experiences can prevent even one greenhorn from making a fatal mistake, then writing this guide will have been worth the effort. I was not always a man of the sea. Once, many years ago, I imagined my future taking a much quieter course. My father was a carpenter, a man of steady hands and unshakable patience. He built things that endured: homes, furniture, pieces of himself carved into wood and passed down through generations. I inherited his craftsmanship, but not his calling. I was never content with shaping wood when there was a whole world of untamed waters calling to me. The sea has a way of choosing its own, and once she set her sights on me, there was no turning back. I am not a complicated man. I prefer my work steady, my coffee strong, and my boots well-worn. I have no use for neckties, cubicles, or the flickering hum of fluorescent lights. The open air suits me better. The salty wind against my face, the rhythmic clang of boots on steel, the deep satisfaction of knowing that out here, I am a part of something greater than myself. Managing an oil rig is far from glamorous, but it is honest. It demands discipline, resilience, and an unwavering respect for the unpredictable moods of the sea. I have spent decades on the water, watching the sun rise and fall over endless waves, feeling the pulse of the rig beneath my feet. There is comfort in the routines, the steady rhythm of maintenance checks, the ever-present hum of machinery, the unchanging cycle of shifts. But there is another side to it, one that wears on a man if he is not careful. The isolation seeps into your bones. The silence becomes heavy. Some learn to carry it. Others let it crush them. Now let us talk about Rig 32. It is an immense structure, a floating metal island adrift in the middle of nowhere. Officially, we are stationed somewhere in the South Sea, though our exact location shifts with the currents and the directives of those in charge. The rig has endured its share of storms, and she has weathered them all. She was built for it. The people who work here. Some are made for this life. Others are not. The crew changes frequently. Some last a few months, others barely make it a few weeks. The turnover rate is high, but that is to be expected. Life out here is not for the faint of heart. The work is grueling, the weather merciless, and the ocean. She is as breathtaking as she is unforgiving. If you take nothing else from this, remember that. When you first arrive, you will be given a silver pin. Small, round, and engraved with the image of what appears to be a sea creature. You are to wear it at all times. No exceptions. Most rookies think nothing of it. They assume it is some kind of company tradition, perhaps a means of identifying workers in an emergency. That is partially true. But there is more to it than that. You will understand soon enough. The rig operates under peculiar circumstances. For one, none of us truly knows who owns it. The paychecks bear the name of a holding company, but beyond that, there is nothing traceable. No headquarters, no higher-ups who visit, no direct line of contact with whoever signs our wages. Before setting foot on the rig, you will sign a non-disclosure agreement. It seems standard enough, just legalese to protect corporate interests. But the rules that matter, they are never written down. You will learn them from the veterans, passed down like folklore until they become second nature. That is why I am writing this guide, to fill in the gaps, to tell you the things they do not put in the safety manuals. This is not a place for careless mistakes. People have gone missing out here. Some lost to the waves, others to, well, things we do not talk about. There are forces in these waters that defy logic, things that do not belong in any rational man's understanding of the world. I have seen them. I have heard stories from men I trust, stories that would make your blood run cold. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let us start at the beginning. You are new here after all. Take it one step at a time and maybe, just maybe, you will find your footing. Life on the rig is tough, but it is honest work. And if you respect the sea, follow the rules and keep your wits about you, you might just make it out of here in one piece. Most people would never truly understand life out here. It is not for everyone. The rig operates on routine, and that routine becomes your lifeline. You wake up at the same time every single day, pull on your gear, and head straight into the day's work. Some days, you find yourself deep in the engine room, inspecting gauges, making sure nothing is on the verge of exploding. Other days, you are topside, tightening bolts against the relentless wind or clearing debris from the deck after a particularly rough night. It is physical, grueling labor, the kind that leaves your muscles aching, your hands raw, and your clothes permanently stained with the scent of salt and oil. But there is something deeply satisfying about it. Something grounding. The food helps too. I have worked on rigs where the cafeteria slop was barely distinguishable from dog food. But not here. On Rig 32 the meals are hot, and the coffee is actually worth drinking. The beans are shipped in from Colombia. Who pays for that kind of luxury? I have no idea, but I am not about to question it. Every morning without fail there is bacon. Thick, crispy, glistening with just the right amount of grease. The smell alone is enough to make you forget how exhausted you are. And on Fridays, pizza night, they do not skimp on the toppings either. These small comforts keep morale up. Out here, isolated in the middle of the sea, you learn to appreciate the little things. And then there are the sunsets. No matter how brutal the day has been, when the sun sinks beneath the waves, painting the sky in streaks of burning orange and deep pink, you stop. Just for a moment. The ocean turns into a vast, shimmering sheet of gold. And in that fleeting instant, the rig does not feel so cold. It does not feel like an industrial prison of steel and machinery. It feels alive. But the rig itself is never silent. Not ever. There is always the ceaseless hum of machinery beneath your feet, the metallic clang of boots against steel, the occasional hiss of steam escaping from unseen vents. At first, it grates on you, gets under your skin, keeps you up at night when all you want is a few hours of sleep. Most of us learn to wear earplugs, at least in the beginning. But after a while you adjust. The noise becomes part of you, like the ticking of a clock or the faint buzz of electricity in the walls. You stop noticing it, until it is gone. But you did not come here to read about bacon, sunsets, or the never-ending hum of the rig. You are here for the stories. And I have plenty. Some you might not believe. Hell, if I had not seen them with my own eyes, I would not believe them either. But they are real and they matter. If you are smart, you will remember them. Because out here, in the vast emptiness of the sea, the ocean does not just take. She tests you. And sometimes she shows you things you would rather not see. Let us start with something small. A fish. Every so often, a fish washes up onto the rig's deck. First glance, it looks ordinary. Black scales, sleek body. Just another deep-sea fish, nothing worth noticing. But do not touch it. Do not try to keep it as some kind of trophy. If you find one tangled in the nets, throw it back as soon as possible. Do not hesitate. Do not think. Just do it. Because these fish are not normal. They look fine at first, harmless even. But if you are foolish enough or just unlucky enough to pry open their mouths, you will see something you will never be able to forget. Not the jagged, serrated teeth of a predator. Not the rows of razor-sharp edges you would expect from something that lurks in the deep. No, these fish have human teeth. Perfectly straight. A little yellowed. Indisputably human. The first time I saw one, my stomach twisted into knots. There is something profoundly wrong about it, something that makes your skin crawl in a way you cannot quite explain. I have seen my fair share of horrors, but those teeth haunt me. One rookie, a cocky young guy who thought he was tougher than the rest of us, decided to keep one. He thought it was funny. "Look at this," he said, grinning as he held it up like some kind of prize. We warned him. Told him to throw it back, not to mess with things he did not understand. He just laughed. That night we heard him screaming. By the time we found him, he was curled up in the corner of his bunk, rocking back and forth, clutching his arm like something was burning him from the inside. His face was pale as death. His eyes wide and empty, like he had seen something that had hollowed him out from the inside. He would not speak. Not at first. When he did, his words were nonsense, disjointed fragments muttered under his breath. He did not last long after that. None of them ever do. Then there are the salt statues. You will only see them after a storm. And I do not mean a light rain or a passing squall. I'm talking about the kind of storm that shakes the rig down to its core. The kind where the waves rise up like living things, slamming against the steel with a force that feels personal, like the ocean is trying to rip us away, drag us under. On nights like that, nobody steps outside. It is suicide. The wind howls like something alive. The rain lashes against the metal like thousands of tiny knives, and the entire rig trembles beneath your feet. But when the storm passes, when the sea calms and the sky turns eerily clear, that is when you see them, standing on the deck. Silent. Figures made entirely of salt. But we will get to that soon enough. Out here, surrounded by the endless expanse of the ocean, you learn quickly just how small you really are. The rig, despite all its steel and machinery, is nothing more than a fragile speck floating in the vast, unrelenting sea. A tiny, man-made structure standing against the relentless power of nature. And if you ever forget that, the ocean has its ways of reminding you. When the storms roll in, they come with fury. The waves rise like living walls of water, slamming against the rig with an almost deliberate force, as if they are testing its strength, or ours. The wind howls through the metal corridors, rattling doors and shaking windows, making it feel like the whole place might just get torn apart. Rain lashes down in sheets so thick you can barely see a few feet ahead, and the entire structure groans under the assault of the storm. But it is not the storm itself that unsettles me the most. It is what comes after. When the sea finally calms and the wind dies down, that is when you will see them. The salt statues. They are not always in the same place, but they are always there. Figures standing silently on the deck, as if the storm itself carved them from the salt and left them behind. At first, you might dismiss them as some strange residue left by the ocean spray, some odd trick of erosion. But then you will look closer. And that is when you will see the details. Arms, legs, torsos, faces, human faces. And it is the faces that truly get to you. The detail is uncanny, too precise to be random. You can see the fine creases of skin, the wrinkles etched around the eyes, the subtle contours of their cheeks. These are not crude, shapeless figures. They are people. Or at least they were. But it is the mouths that linger in your mind long after the statues are gone. They are always open, frozen in silent screams. Some of them have their hands outstretched, as if reaching for something or someone. They stand there, unmoving, locked in a moment of final desperation. We do not touch them. We do not talk about them. By midday, they are usually gone, eroded by the wind or dissolved back into the sea, as if they were never there to begin with. But they always return. Maybe not after the very next storm, but eventually they come back. I have spent years trying to understand where they come from, why they appear. I have asked myself 100 times if there is some rational explanation, some natural phenomenon that can account for them. But I have never found an answer. And maybe it is better that way. So, if you ever find yourself out on the deck after a storm and you see them, those hollow-eyed figures, their mouths frozen in eternal agony, do not go poking around. Do not try to study them. Take them as a warning. A reminder of what the ocean is capable of. 'Cause the sea does not just take. Sometimes it leaves things behind. Things you would rather not think about. That is enough for now. There is more to tell, but you will need time to let this sink in. Life on the rig might seem like nothing but routine at first, a never-ending cycle of work and rest. But it does not take long for the strange and the unexplainable to find you. And when it does, you had better be ready. Because the ocean is full of strange things. Things I will never understand. I do not have answers for all of it. Hell, most of it. But I have seen enough to know this. The less you question it, the safer you will be. I am writing all of this down because the rookies need to know. You are coming to a place where the rules of the world do not always seem to apply. The sea is as old as time, and there are things within it that we will never fully grasp. There are nights out here when the water turns as dark as liquid pitch. No light penetrates its surface, and it stretches endlessly in every direction, a vast and bottomless void. It is unnerving, staring into that darkness. But just when you think it cannot possibly get any darker, that is when you see them. Stars. Tiny pinpricks of light scattered across the surface of the water, shimmering like a second sky beneath the waves. It is beautiful in a way. Hypnotic. But it does not make sense. When you are this far from shore, with nothing but the rig's lights cutting through the darkness, you learn to question beauty like that. One of the scariest nights of my life happened when I was still new to the rig. It was 40 years ago, back when I was young, eager, and maybe a little too reckless for my own good. I had just finished my shift and decided to head up to the observation deck for a smoke. It was supposed to be a quiet night, or so I thought. The air was heavy with the promise of a storm, thick with electricity, the kind that makes your skin prickle. The clouds overhead were an unbroken mass of black, blocking out every last trace of the moon and stars. The only light came from the rig itself, the dull glow of floodlights casting long, eerie shadows across the deck. I leaned against the railing, lit my cigarette, and took a slow, steady drag. The ocean below was as black as I had ever seen it, featureless, bottomless, a pit of nothingness. But then something changed. Tiny dots of light began to appear, scattered across the surface of the water. At first, I thought they were reflections from the rig's lights. But that was impossible. They did not move with the waves like reflections should. They remained perfectly still, as if pinned to the surface of the sea like stars trapped beneath the water. I stared at them mesmerized. And then, a terrible realization settled into my gut. The sky above me was completely covered in storm clouds. There was nothing left to reflect. And yet the lights remained. The clouds above were thick and unbroken, a heavy ceiling of storm-black sky stretching as far as the eye could see. There were no stars, no moonlight, nothing but the distant flashes of lightning flickering along the horizon. And yet there were lights in the water. At first, I thought they were reflections, some strange trick of the rig's floodlights bouncing off the waves. But they were too still, too deliberate. They did not shift with the movement of the water, did not ripple or break apart like reflections should. They remained fixed in place, tiny pinpricks of pale light scattered across the vast, inky surface of the sea. That was when the realization struck me. They were not stars at all. They were eyes. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. All of them staring up at me from the depths. A cold wave of nausea rolled through my stomach, and my cigarette slipped from between my fingers, falling soundlessly into the dark water below. My breath caught in my throat, my body frozen in place, locked in a silent standoff with whatever was watching me from beneath the waves. I do not remember much after that. Just the sound of my own boots slamming against the metal grating as I turned and ran, my heart hammering in my chest. I did not stop until I was inside, safe within the fluorescent-lit corridors of the rig, surrounded by the reassuring hum of machinery and the distant voices of my crewmates. It took me months before I could bring myself to step out onto the deck again after dark. Even now, after all these years, I avoid looking at the water too much. 'Cause you never know what might be staring back. That was not the last strange thing I have seen out here. Far from it. The ocean has a way of showing you things that stay with you, no matter how much you try to forget. Some of them are subtle. A shadow moving where it should not, a whisper carried on the wind when no one is there. Others are impossible to ignore. One of the things I cannot shake is the ship. Every man on this rig knows about it, even if they do not talk about it. It only appears on stormy nights. You will be out on the deck, fighting against the wind and rain to secure the equipment, double-checking the chains and the cables, making sure nothing comes loose in the chaos. And then, through the haze of the storm, you will see it. A massive ship, moving silently across the water. It looks like something torn straight from the pages of a history book. An ancient sailing vessel, its great wooden hull so covered in barnacles and sea growth that it is nearly indistinguishable from the waves themselves. Its sails are tattered, great sheets of fabric hanging in ragged strips, yet somehow, impossibly, they still carry it forward. The ship moves smoothly, gliding through the churning sea as if the storm has no hold over it. And you never see anyone on board. Not a single soul. The first time I saw it, I thought it was some kind of mirage, a trick of the rain and exhaustion playing with my eyes. But then I glanced at the men beside me and saw the same expression on their faces, the same wide-eyed, unspoken terror. They saw it too. We did not say a word. No one ever does. But we all think the same thing, that is Davy Jones. You have probably heard the legend. If you have not, let me fill you in. They say he is the captain of the Flying Dutchman, doomed to sail the seas for eternity. Some stories claim he was a treacherous sailor who betrayed his crew in pursuit of wealth. Others say he was a man so in love with the ocean that he struck a deal with the devil himself, trading his soul for the chance to sail forever. No matter which version of the tale you believe, it always ends the same way. Davy Jones is cursed. And those who cross his path are doomed as well. Sailors have feared him for centuries. They say he collects the souls of those who perish at sea, dragging them down to his locker at the bottom of the ocean. When you spend your days surrounded by nothing but water, these old stories start to feel a little more real. They are not just legends. They are warnings. So when that ship appears, you do not call out to it. You do not wave, and you sure as hell do not try to signal it. You keep your head down. You do your job. And you hope it keeps moving. It always does. There is one rule on Rig 32 that you need to understand better than any of the others. Never go through the red basement door. You might not even see it during your time here. It is not always there. But when it is, you will know. It is a heavy rust-red door, set deep into the walls of the rig's lower levels, tucked away near the stairs that lead to storage. You could walk past that spot 100 times and never see it. But then one day it will just be there. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows who built it or why it comes and goes the way it does. But one thing is certain, if you see it, you leave. You do not touch the handle. You do not linger too long staring at it. Because the longer you stand there, the more curious you will become. And curiosity on Rig 32 is the kind of thing that will get you killed. The last person who ignored that rule did not live long enough to regret it. His name was Marco. He was a welder. Good guy. Always had a joke ready. Always the first to lend a hand when someone needed help. He had been on the rig for maybe 6 months when it happened. And 6 months was all it took. Marco had been working on the rig for about 6 months when he came across the door. I do not know what possessed him to open it. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Maybe he was one of those people who had to see something for themselves to believe it. Whatever the reason, he made the mistake of stepping through. He did not tell anyone. He just vanished during his shift, slipped away unnoticed, and never returned. We searched for him everywhere. We tore the rig apart looking. Every inch of it. But he was gone. Weeks later, in the middle of a violent storm, his body washed up onto the deck. That was the first and only time I had ever seen something like that happen. The sea does not give back what it takes. Not usually. But there he was, sprawled out on the cold metal. His skin pale and his clothes dripping with seawater. No one said a word. No one needed to. We all understood. The red door had taken him. But I have not always followed the rules myself. When I was young and new to the rig, I had a rebellious streak. I did not like being told what I could and could not do, especially when no one could give me a good reason why. So one night, when the door appeared during my shift, I decided I was going to see for myself what was on the other side. It was stupid. I knew it even as I turned the handle. The door was heavy, and it groaned against the hinges as it swung open. A rush of cold, damp air met me, carrying with it the scent of salt and something metallic, something wrong. Beyond the threshold, a narrow metal staircase spiraled downward. It should not have been there. I had been through that part of the rig before. There was no stairwell, no passageway leading down into the unknown. But it was there now. The air grew colder with every step I took, and the familiar hum of the rig's machinery faded until it was nothing more than a distant, muffled vibration. By the time I reached the bottom, everything was silent. I found myself in a strange, narrow room. The walls were steel, slick with condensation. The floor was uneven, warped in places, as if it had been subjected to an impossible pressure, the kind you would expect from something deep beneath the ocean. At the far end of the room, a wide, circular window dominated the wall. Through it I could see the sea. But it was not the sea as I had ever known it. It was darker than it should have been, deeper, endless. No movement, no currents, no rippling waves. Just still, suffocating blackness. I do not know how long I stood there, staring. But the longer I stayed, the more I felt something was staring back. Turn. I climbed the stairs, step by step, never looking over my shoulder. When I reached the top, I shut the door behind me and walked away. The next day the door was gone. I have seen it a handful of times since then, and each time I have made sure to give it a wide berth. I do not know what would have happened if I had lingered. Or worse, if the door had disappeared while I was still inside. That is the thing about it. You cannot trust it to stay where it is. Comes and goes on its own terms. And you do not want to be caught on the wrong side of it when it vanishes. I do not know why the door exists. I do not know who built that room or why it is there. Maybe it is part of the rig's original design. Some forgotten relic of a time when people did not ask as many questions. Or maybe it is something else entirely. Something that does not belong in this world. Whatever it is not for us to understand. All we can do is stay out of its way. If you are ever unlucky enough to stumble across it during your time here, remember this. Leave it alone. Do not go inside. But the red door is not the only place on this rig that should be left alone. There is another room. The captain's quarters. No, not mine. I am talking about the captain before me. His room has been empty for years now, and no one sets foot inside. It is not locked. You could open the door if you wanted to. But no one does. And no one ever will. It is a nice space too. Bigger than the regular bunks, with its own desk, a window that looks out over the ocean, and a bed that is far more comfortable than anything else on the rig. But it remains untouched. Frozen in time like a sealed exhibit in a museum. Because the last captain disappeared. Just like that. One day he was here, running the rig as usual. The next he was not. There was no warning. No goodbye. No sign of struggle. He was just gone. The crew searched high and low. They turned the rig upside down, combed through every inch of it. But they did not find so much as a footprint. That was decades ago. And his disappearance is still a mystery. One of many on Rig 32. I have asked around, tried to piece together what happened from the men who were here back then. But no one knows. Or if they do, they are not talking. If they do know, they are not saying. All anyone will tell me is that he was a good captain. Fair, hardworking, the kind of leader men respected. And then, one day he simply was not there anymore. The room stays empty now. Not because of superstition. At least that is what the crew claims. They say it is out of respect. But that is not the strangest part. On calm nights, when the sea is still and the rig is silent, some of the crew say they have seen a man standing out on the observation deck. A man in a yellow jacket. He is always in the same spot, right by the railing, staring out at the water, a cigarette glowing faintly in his hand. If you get close enough, you will see that he wears a small silver pin on his chest. The same pin every worker here receives when they first come aboard. The first time I heard about him, I thought it was just another ghost story. Something the veterans told the rookies to keep them on edge. But then I saw him for myself. It was one of those nights where the ocean looks like glass, stretching out forever beneath the stars. I had finished my shift and went up to the deck for a smoke, just like I always did. First I thought I was alone. But then I saw him. A man in a weathered yellow jacket. His back turned to me, standing motionless at the railing. I do not know why I did it, but I nodded and said, "Good evening." Slowly he turned his head, just enough for me to catch the outline of his face in the dim light. He did not say a word. He just gave me a slow, deliberate nod and took another drag from his cigarette. I hesitated. Then I turned and left. I did not go back to the observation deck for 3 days after that. That is the rule. If you see him, always say something. Acknowledge him. Be polite. But do not linger. Do not push your luck. And whatever you do, Do not return to the deck for at least 3 nights. The crew says it is safer that way. Some believe the man in the yellow jacket is the old captain, still watching over the rig in his own way. Others think he is something else entirely. Something the ocean sent to remind us of our place. Whatever he is, one thing is certain. Sometimes people disappear after seeing him. Not often, but often enough. There was Marco, the welder who vanished after opening the red door. Before him, there was a deckhand named Vic. He ignored the 3-day rule. The very next night, he went back to the observation deck. By morning he was gone. No one knows what happens to them. I have taken to leaving a cup of coffee on the deck when I see him. Nothing fancy, just the same bitter brew we drink in the cafeteria. But it feels like the right thing to do. My parents were not religious, but they always taught me to respect things I did not understand. The coffee is my way of doing that. A small offering. A gesture of good faith. I do not know if he takes it. By the time I check, the cup is always empty. Could be the wind. Could be the sea spray. Still, it makes me feel better. I have only seen him a handful of times over the years. And every time it is the same. He does not speak. He does not move. He only stands there, cigarette in hand, staring out at the water as if he is waiting for something or someone. If you are smart, you will follow the rules. If you see him, nod your head. Say good evening. Maybe ask a question if you are feeling brave. He will not answer. But that is not the point. The point is to show respect. Because if it really is the old captain, he has earned that much. That is all I have to say about the man in the yellow jacket. You will have to decide for yourself what to believe. But there is one last thing. The badges. Every crew member on Rig 32 gets one when they first come aboard. Small token. About the size of a silver dollar. Polished metal. Untarnished no matter how many storms you endure. On the front, an engraving. A kraken coiled around an anchor, its tentacles wrapped tight. And beneath it, the company's logo. A reminder of who we work for. And maybe a warning. The badges catch the light in a way that makes them seem almost alive. Officially, they are just company identification. They serve practical purposes, allowing crew members to clock in and out, granting access to certain restricted areas of the rig, and identifying us in the event of an accident. Just another piece of equipment like the hard hats and harnesses we wear. But like most things on this rig, there is far more to them than meets the eye. The badges are also keys. Certain badges, ones that look just like the rest but are not, open doors that should not exist. Doors that are not listed on any blueprint. Doors hidden away in the lower levels of the rig, where the metal platform descends deep beneath the waves. These are not the usual maintenance rooms or storage spaces. No one talks about what lies behind them. And I do not think anyone truly wants to know. There is something about those doors that makes your gut twist, even if you are just passing by. Something in the air around them feels wrong, like the pressure changes, like you are suddenly much farther from the surface than you should be. And then, of course, there is what is below the rig. We do not know what it is. We only know that it is there. And that it is bigger than the rig itself. It is not aggressive. Least not yet. But it does not need to be. Its presence alone is enough. Sometimes when the rig groans and shudders, I cannot tell if it is just the machinery straining against the weight of the ocean, or if it is that thing in the depths shifting, breathing, stirring. Whatever it is, you do not want to get too close to it. And you certainly do not want it to notice you. That is why we wear the badges. They keep us safe. Or at least that is what we tell ourselves. But the badges do more than that. They are also our lifeline. If you ever find yourself thrown overboard during a storm, and believe me, you do not want to end up in that water, your badge may be the only thing that saves you. It does not happen often. But when it does, you never forget it. I have only seen it happen once. It was 10 years ago, during one of the worst storms I have ever experienced. The kind of storm that makes you feel small, that reminds you how fragile you are out here. The waves towered high, slamming against the rig with enough force to make the steel frame tremble. The wind howled, so loud it drowned out even the emergency alarms, and the rain poured in thick, blinding sheets. We were strapped in, doing everything we could to secure the equipment, when one of the rookies lost his footing. A single misstep. And then he was gone, swallowed by the black water below. The sea was merciless, tossing him like a rag doll. We shouted, threw ropes, tried to reach him, but the current was too strong. And then we saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them, scattered across the surface of the water like reflections of the stars above. And then, from the depths, something else rose. Mouth. It was enormous, wider than half the rig. But it was not filled with jagged, monstrous teeth like you would expect from a sea creature. No. The teeth were human. Row after row of them. Yellowed. Too perfect. Just like the fish we sometimes find washed up on the deck. The mouth opened, sucking in the sea around it, creating a whirlpool that dragged everything toward it. The rookie flailed, fighting the pull, but it was useless. He was doomed. We could see it in his face as he fought against the current. His screams lost in the storm. And then he clutched his badge. And the badge began to glow. A light so bright it cut through the darkness, through the wind and the rain, piercing the chaos like a beacon. And then, from the depths, something else came. Kelpie. It rose from the water like something out of a dream, or a nightmare. It had the shape of a horse, but its mane was made of dripping seaweed, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The rookie did not hesitate. He reached out, grabbed onto the Kelpie's slick, shifting form, and held on with everything he had. The Kelpie fought against the whirlpool, its strength unreal, and somehow, impossibly, it won. It dragged him free of the current, pulling him back toward the rig. We were there waiting. We reached for him, hands outstretched. And when the Kelpie brought him close enough, we hauled him onto the deck. The Kelpie did not stay. As soon as the rookie was safe, it turned and disappeared beneath the waves. And with it, so did the eyes. So did the mouth. The storm quieted soon after, like whatever force had been stirring beneath us had been satisfied. That is the only time I have seen something like that happen. But it is not the only story. Some of the crew believe that if you toss your badge into the water, you can make a kind of bargain. You ask for help. And if whatever is down there likes you, it will answer. But you do not get to choose what comes to your aid. You do not even know if anything will come at all. It is a gamble. One I would not recommend taking lightly. What I do know is this. You do not want to lose your badge. Keep it close. Wear it at all times. Because it is more than just a company ID. More than just a piece of polished metal stamped with a corporate logo. It is protection. It is a connection. It is a promise. And out here, with nothing but the endless, shifting ocean stretching in every direction, sometimes that is all you have. That is the last story I will tell you. If you are reading this, you are probably already on the rig, settling into your bunk, adjusting to the ever-present hum of machinery and the sharp scent of salt in the air. Maybe you will never see the red door. Maybe you will never stand on the observation deck and catch sight of the man in the yellow jacket. Maybe you will never look over the railing and see something staring back at you. Maybe your time here will be nothing more than routine shifts, bad coffee, and Friday pizza nights. If that is the case, consider yourself lucky. But if you do see something, if you hear the groan of something massive moving beneath you, or catch a glimpse of glowing eyes where there should be none, remember what I have told you. The ocean is beautiful, but she is also vast, ancient, and filled with things we will never fully understand. Respect her. Follow the rules. And whatever you do, keep your badge close. Because sometimes, it is the only thing standing between you and whatever is waiting in the dark.